Welcome to another edition of Inspired Stories, where leaders share their experiences so we can learn from their successes, how they've overcome adversity, and explore current challenges they're facing.
Welcome to another edition of the Inspired Stories podcast, where leaders share their experiences so we can learn from their successes and be inspired by how they've overcome adversity. My name is Anthony Codispoti, and today's guest is Dwain Celistan, managing partner of DHR Global, who, for more than 30 years, has been a leading provider of executive search, leadership consulting, and emerging leader search solutions with more than 50 wholly owned locations around the globe. Their consultants deliver senior-level executive search and talent advisory services tailored to the unique requirements of their clients. Dwain himself has been recognized as a top 10 performer in the company multiple times and number one globally 3 times. He's worked with 25 Fortune 500 companies, PE-backed firms, universities, and the largest publicly traded company in India. He's a public speaker, and has published 4 books. Now, before we get into all that good stuff about Dwain, today's episode is brought to you by my company, Add Back Benefits Agency, where we offer very specific and unique employee benefits that are both great for your team and fiscally optimized for your bottom line. One recent client was able to add over $900 per employee per year in extra cash flow by implementing one of our proprietary programs. Results vary for each company, and some organizations may not be eligible. To find out if your company qualifies, contact us today at addbackbenefitsagency.com. Now, back to our guest today, managing partner of DHR Global, Dwain. I appreciate you making the time to share your story today.
Hey, thanks so much. Looking forward to it.
Okay, Dwain, so tell us in your own words, what does DHR Global do?
We're largely an executive search firm that provides talent advisory services. So when organizations have leadership needs and they can't fill them themselves and they decide to go outside to a third party, we're many times the third party that's selected. And we do it globally, and we do it from what we call emerging leaders up through board members.
Okay. Now, I'm looking at your LinkedIn page. I see that you've been there over 17 years. That's a long time. I'm curious, how did you first get started there?
Well, I began my career in corporate America. Got an opportunity to be a vice president, reporting to the president for most of the last 10 years of my career. And a friend of mine who worked at a large search firm had dinner with me, and he shared all the good things about executive search and why I might be the right type of person to move into that as a career space. And I had a couple of bumps in the road, and I pursued this new avenue. And after 3 years, they acquired the company I was with. Unbeknownst to me, they were not financially in a good position. And then I became part of DHR, and it's been a great role for me, a great organization, because we have colleagues in areas where I'm not an expert. So we do a collaborative approach in many instances. So if you have a need in a function or in an industry where you may not be the expert, you can have a colleague that can come in and bring that expertise. So 1 + 1 can hopefully be greater than 2.
Can you describe in a little bit more detail what your role entails? Are you going out and looking for the companies that have a need? Are you trying to find the executives who are looking for a new opportunity? What is sort of the push-pull relationship there?
No, great question, because it's not always clear. Most people, when they hear executive recruiter, they think, wow, I have a friend that needs a job. That's usually the first thought that comes to mind. But what it is in an executive or retained search model, not executive, but retained search model, is organizations hire us first. So the beginning is the organization has a need for a leader, be it a board member, a leader of a department function, what have you. And they know that that is a critical next step for them, and they can't promote someone from within, or they want to make a contrast to an external talent to some internal talent. And they come to a third party. They've decided to go to a third party to find that external talent. We are one of those firms, and we compete with all other retained search firms for that opportunity to support that organization, be it a for profit or non for profit entity.
And so, what makes somebody choose Dwain Celistan and DHR Global over all the other options out there?
That's also the question. And it does vary, because part of it is the personality, because you're going to work together as a team for 3 months or more, depending on how complicated or difficult the project will be. So it's typically someone you'd want to spend that time with because you have choices as the organization. It's not like it's one or two people to choose from. There are hundreds to choose from. So you want to choose someone that you're comfortable with interacting over time for what might be stressful at points in time of the process. The other is, I think, what I uniquely bring to the table, which other people have their unique elements. But what I bring uniquely is that I was in corporate America, worked at very large companies at senior roles. I also, being a diverse person, had a different experience in that, getting to the senior levels that I had. So when I speak to my clients, I'm speaking from not just I've done this work before as a recruiter, but I many times have had those interactions as a senior executive. I've led large teams of 100 plus people. I had a budget of, revenue target of 600 plus million, a budget of 100 million in spend. So there are many things that I uniquely bring from those career experiences that very few other executives who do what I do can bring. The other thing that I do that's unique and important is I ensure that they have diverse talent in the pool from which they will select their leader or their person from us. And we define diversity as a company, women globally, because gender is the same, choices globally, and people of color and women in the US, because we have our own unique definitions of what diversity are in the US. And while there are many possibilities for that definition, we use people of color and women as the ones that we track and can track over time. And not all recruiters believe that they need to do that. Not all clients feel that they need that as part of the pool that's presented. But that's something uniquely I do, and over 70% of the people I place fall into that category of diversity.
And do you feel like, Dwain, this is so important to you because of your own experiences having gone through corporate America? Did you find it more difficult to move up and to get opportunities? And so this is a way for you to kind of give back?
I hadn't thought about it quite like that, but that's a piece of it. I also, in one of my four books that I wrote, there was some tangible evidence that I had in my career of diverse talent performing admirably relative to more homogeneous talent.
Okay.
Um, One company I worked for 10 years, they basically were flat from a stock performance and many other areas of performance. During my 4 years there, we had a lot more diverse leaders come in. One led all of operations, which was critical to for costs and sales, marketing, and finance. So this was a very different component of leadership than we had prior to that. And within the 4 years I was there, the company went from claiming quality was great, and in 4 years, the quality measured 90% better on the same metrics. And
Wow.
I was a leader on that team because I challenged the president in my first few weeks. I was saying, well, you think quality is good, but here's the data that says it's parity to many of our key competitors. And I wasn't challenging him for any other reason than, hey, I'm a fact-based guy. I'm not just going to beat my chest that we think we're good. I want to demonstrate we're good. And I thought we had a better product, but we didn't prove it in the data. And so he said, well, do something about it. And so we did. There are a number of things we did, but 90% improvement on the same metrics. The other thing we did was we nearly doubled our return on invested capital, which is one of the most difficult measures to move at all, let alone double. And lastly, we tripled our stock price in a category with no M&A activity. So there were no changes in ownership or structure of our key competitors. Uh, and to do that in any time is incredible. But most of our competitors had your normal single digit growth, double digit maybe, but single. But we tripled, so far exceeded all of our competitors. So I link that to the leadership differential, not to some other factors.
So this is really interesting, Dwayne. I want to dig into this a little bit more because what I'm hearing you say is diversity is not just important because morally it's the right thing to do. You're saying, hey, listen, I don't care who you are, what your background is, look at the data, look at the numbers. Like what you're just telling me, 90% improvement in quality. And I want to hear a little bit more about how that got measured, but doubled your return on investment and capital, tripled your stock price in an industry that was relatively flat. I mean, those are beyond phenomenal results. And it sounds like you're telling me the biggest lever that you pulled was we brought in diversity. We brought in diverse backgrounds, people who had different ideas. They come from different experiences, and that was able to elevate the company in pretty phenomenal ways.
Absolutely. Um, and one would argue we had a new CEO 3 years prior, but he had been there 3 years, and the performance was still not appreciably better. And rest in peace. He's no longer with us. This guy was an awesome leader, but the smartest thing he did was guide the players he subsequently brought in, because the players he had for those 3 years were similar to the players of the previous seven in their performance and output.
So let's go a layer deeper here and tell me, what do you think it was about bringing in, like I'm sort of making my own conclusions and connecting dots in my own way. What do you think was the biggest difference in bringing in a more diverse set of executives into the company that allowed for such a huge upward trajectory?
Well, everyone who was brought in had a very good track record in their space prior to joining. So the person who led operations, which was the bulk of the people, and as mentioned, the bulk of the costs. I mean, that was overwhelmingly the cost of the product. Um, his leadership style was phenomenal. What he did, many incredible things to drive the cost down and help with the quality. Again, the quality improved. So it wasn't just a cost lever. Our goals as an organization didn't change. We still had to go out and do the same things. We didn't have different goals or objectives, but how we viewed them and approached them. So on the quality front, we didn't have to convince people that we had a quality product. We had to prove it. So everybody thought we had great quality to begin with. Like everybody associated with our business thought our quality was great. It just wasn't. It was just okay. So what we did was we changed how we shipped the product. We changed how we measured the product. We changed how we recognized people who did a phenomenal job with the product. We did so many things that built on what we already knew and what people already felt. So we didn't have to convince people. There are times when you've had a product issue and now you have to convince people our product is still good. That was not a situation for us. We had to now say, okay, for those of you who do a phenomenal job, which includes this, so we defined it, and people worked towards it, and I tell you, it was so impressive when people were close and didn't get recognized. Most of them said it's on us to be better next time because we want that recognition. We don't want to be close. We want that perfect score, because you have to be perfect in their part of the puzzle to be recognized. Anything less than perfect, you didn't get recognized. And then of those who got recognized, they got, all kinds of adulations, and, good things happened for them. So it was really a positive way to build on our strength. And we also had our people do different things. And I was one of 8 who we broke up the country into 8 areas. And my team also did the best in quality because I was on the quality team. So we also demonstrated, well, how you can do it at, best in class model and had that cascade to our colleagues in other parts of the country. So it was really exciting, and it was fun, and it was positive, not punitive kind of an approach.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you talk about some of this data in one of your books. Which book is that?
There's Recruiter's Guide to uh, Finding Diverse Talent.
Okay. And is that a book that people can find on a website or on Amazon somewhere?
I did not do it that way.
Okay.
I did publish some books through Amazon, and they chose not to pay me for my sales. So I don't feel the need to work with those guys, the largest bookseller probably in the world, but I don't feel the need to be a part of their ecosystem anymore.
Yeah, fair enough. I would I'd feel the same way. Can we give voice to maybe one or two of the other books that you're proud of? What was some of the
Yeah,
content there?
the first one was five simple steps to achieving your dreams, and then college students, six simple steps to achieving your dreams. And what I wanted to do was, I used to listen to speakers like Les Brown and Tony Robbins when I had a sales role where I was in a lot of windshield time. And I found them really motivating. And I didn't want to do it quite in the way they did it because they're great because of their skills and uniqueness. And I'm not anything close to those guys. But I did think that there are ways to approach a dream of success that are formulaic, that aren't so difficult that the end of any individual can't pursue their dream. And everybody's dreams are personal, right? Some want to be super athletic, some want to do something professionally, what have you. And there are also, I've listed about 10 broad areas where you might want to improve. Call it health, call it finances, call it your adventure side. So it's not only about any one area. It's not unique about, oh, my professional path. Um, and so I just lay out the five steps and who you should and shouldn't bring into your camp and why. You can't share with everyone your dreams because some people you share them with will tear them down, call you foolish, what have you. But there are those people who will be your thought partner, who will ask you how you're doing against your dreams, who will be a positive person in your desire to achieve something special. And then I wrote this other book uh, around career success, basically how to navigate the career goals and pathways, because there are things that aren't obvious to everyone. And I've had wild success in corporate America, but I've also had some significant bumps and bruises along the way that went well in a very different direction that I would have expected or desired. And some of those things I did and didn't know. So everybody, I don't think I had a mentor in my corporate career. Everybody's looking for mentors, and that's fine. I didn't have one. So I learned a lot of things the hard way. And listening to these books and tapes and Think and Grow Rich and The Magic of Thinking Big were two big books that helped me think about the challenges and how to write your own ship, how to help get up and move forward, how to navigate uh, situations, good, bad, or indifferent, to make them a positive thing. Uh, and so many people don't have, many professionals don't have that. So I tried to lay out some things, even how do you negotiate? How do you work with your supervisor? Um, the one slide that I created, which is something I've used when I've coached many people, is I think it's simple but positive. It's first, share with your supervisor what you did since the last time you met. Some people meet weekly, monthly, quarterly, depends on the nature of your role and your supervisor's role. But you can't assume your supervisor is familiar with all the things you've accomplished since the last time. So that's first. So you help them say, oh, I didn't know you did these things, because again, you may be one of five or more subordinates for that person. The next thing is, here's what I'm going to do, and here's when I plan to accomplish it. And the power of that is that the supervisor can say one of two or three things. One, great. I like what you're doing and how you're prioritizing. Two, you're missing something that should be done between now and the time we connect that's not on your list. You're like, oh, aha, I didn't have this particular activity on my list, and I need to make it a priority aligned with my supervisor. Or three, I like what's on the list. I don't like the priority. You're saying you're going to do this thing in 2 weeks. I need that thing tomorrow. So now you have the most important thing with a subordinate and a supervisor, alignment. What is important now relative to your supervisor's expectations? Because the employee that gives the supervisor that output, that alignment, is more likely to be successful with that supervisor
Mhm.
than if you're doing what you think is best, however you got there, but it's not what the supervisor is expecting or desires for best outcomes between now and the next time you meet. That is the single most powerful thing that I think a professional can do in their career. Be aligned with their supervisor and then crush those things that are on that alignment and agreement.
Is there a way for somebody to access this book?
Yes. Wow. So I guess D Celistan at Comcast.net. I can give books away because
Okay.
I used to sell them, but they've been published for some time, and I'm fine with the revenue from that
Just want
exchange.
nice opportunity to give back to somebody else, who was in a similar position to you. You didn't have a mentor, and it's why you created a lot of this content. And so, very generous of you to make that content available to other folks. Can you say the email address again, and we'll be sure to put it in the show notes as well.
Oh yes, DCELISTAN at Comcast.net.
Oh, that's great. So, yeah, we mentioned that you've been at DHR Global 17 years. It's a long time. What is it about the company that keeps you there, Dwayne?
I think the people are part of it, and I've worked with quite a number of different people. I've worked with people in different countries, different markets, different industry areas and functional areas of expertise. And I found that to be great. And, this was a new career, second career for me. So it took me about 4 years to be what I would call decent. That means almost as good as I was in my other career financially. And, I needed a lot of help to get there because in this instance, knowing a lot of people who are in the right position is helpful, but I didn't know how to convert a friend relationship or a business relationship to one where there's commerce between me and that person. And I had to get a colleague that was great. So in the first couple of years, I could get us meetings, and his job was to get us business because I just I hadn't developed the muscle yet of converting that relationship to someone that we could do business together. And it just took a long time to get that muscle developed to a level that put me in a place where I thought I was at least uh, a competent total professional. I could find the people, but finding the people was far less important if you didn't have enough assignments where that made a difference. And it did take a while. I think somebody's interviewed someone that said about 10,000 hours, kind of a mindset
Mm.
where you really need to just put in the work and do the loop of what am I doing well? What do I need to improve upon? What is and isn't working? And be honest with yourself. Um, One of the things that really slowed me down was I was trying to do too many things. You come from corporate and it's clear what you need to do for, a week, a month. And you really don't, I really didn't have much time to do other things professionally. There's just not enough time. If I had another 3 hours, there are plenty of things as a leader of a function that I would have needed to do. So if I was going to work 3 more hours, I needed to work on those things to be great at my job. Whereas I got free, so I started speaking. I wrote articles, I wrote books, I coached people. I was just doing so many things, and I was fair to middling at most of them. I wasn't awesome at any of these other things. And what I realized, I need to focus. I need to go from light to laser. And so moving to a position of I'm going to focus on search, and I'm going to use all those other things to reinforce search, and particularly on finding diverse talent in search. So this is my unique proposition. Here's how I'm different slash better than everybody else doing the work. And here's why a client will select me of that large pool of possibilities. And that really helped me because it helped me in my elevator speeches, it helped me in my presentations, panel discussions, webinars, but it was all reinforcing a very similar message as opposed to all this diffusion of what does Dwain stand for? What is Dwain trying to accomplish in the marketplace?
So this is going to be a question I wanted to ask, which was, you say it took you 4 years to kind of build that muscle on being able to convert and close the sale. And I would love, because, there's a lot of people, in sales, trying to get into sales, trying to figure, this part of the path out. And so one of the things I'm hearing you say is, man, I was all over the place. I was a public speaker. I was publishing articles. I was writing books, and I was okay at those, but I wasn't amazing. And I wanted to be amazing at something. And so Dwain says, okay, I got to laser focus. Who am I? What do I stand for? What's my unique selling proposition? And you found it in, I'm the guy that can bring diversity to the table, and I can back it up with data that shows why that's better for your business. So that is, I would think, either a unique or a very special selling proposition that not a lot of people can bring to the table. Is that the only thing that contributed to the increase in closings and converting into sales, or were there other things from year zero to year four that you changed that helped with that?
Good question. So, for perspective, I made in year one the least amount of money I made in like 25 years. So
Mm-hmm.
I was working from my perspective, a very low base. I can't speak for anyone else. I established what the numbers are for me. My second year, I nearly doubled that. And it was
Okay.
still, from my standpoint, I wasn't even at six figures. So, I'm like, this isn't working. 50% more the next year, I'm making like a decent living for many, not anywhere close to what I was doing as a vice president in a large company, reporting to the president level VP. And then the next year, I got to almost what I did in my last year at corporate, almost. So in that journey, I realized my close rate wasn't that good. I wasn't probably touching enough people. I knew my messaging wasn't optimal. But when you win more, because I was winning more each year, you get some positive feedback. Okay, that's working, but it's not working enough. Your hit rate was still well below what I need to be, in my own mind, at least good in this new space. Uh, I clearly recognize I was a relative rookie, early stage player, and this isn't like pro sports where, the rookie of the year can be phenomenal. I was a rookie. That was the only thing that I was a rookie and an early stage player. So it took more time to develop. By working with a variety of people, I was able to see different things that they did, how they were better at either presenting, closing, asking for the order, following up, getting meetings, many of the smaller attributes that you need to win. You can't win if you don't present to enough people. And who are the people you need to present to, and a whole host of things. And there's another dimension that sometimes it takes a while to secure a client. And I have clients that's taken me 5 to 10 years before I
Wow.
got any business. So clearly in year four, those people who would be open to giving me business at some point, they hadn't gotten there yet. the maturity of our relationship, the confidence they had that I could do what was needed relative to others. We just hadn't gotten to that point yet. And so sometimes it has to marinate. Well, how would you know that in year two that you need more than 2 years to really do business with some of the folks that find you okay, but not good enough to give you an agreement yet? And so those were some of the lessons that some of you just can't, you just don't know because you haven't been there long. So yes, it was quite a few pieces that turned, and I have continued to tweak and modify uh, approaches. Each year I do a plan, and there are areas that I want to continue to improve upon, and uh, colleagues that I work with that again I still learn from them because many of my colleagues are phenomenal and they just don't do it the same way I do it. And I can't necessarily mimic them, but I can maybe take a piece from some of their best practices, and many times that's just a key to get me just a little bit better each year. Looking at some of my colleagues and some of the approaches they use, sometimes it's not a technique; it's just the way they do the search process that I've learned from. So continue to learn.
Yeah, always be in learning mode. Dwayne, what would be maybe just if you could distill down into one significant piece of advice that you could give to somebody in sales?
I think, wow,
That's a big
one,
one.
yeah, yeah. One is to, I think if you know your customer and your product, so knowledge, because it's very difficult to sell your customer if you've not done sufficient homework on them, their business, them as an individual, their business, because in a dialogue, they will know what you know. If you speak long enough, if you get past just introductory, if you go maybe 20 plus minutes, they will know based on their knowledge and other people who do what you do, where you fit on the understanding of them, their issues, their business. And I've been in situations where I didn't do homework, and I've seen colleagues who did homework well beyond any homework I had ever planned to do, and how much more effective they were in that meeting. And I was like, oh my gosh, I was like 25% of the homework this
Mm.
colleague did in a meeting. I still remember it now. I had called him in because I was unable to personally go to the meeting. So I was on the phone and he was personally there. And he knew so much about the people we're meeting with. They, went to their collegiate backgrounds and he had made some connections with that. He knew their business, the size, the growth, the scope. And I was at a much, much higher level of my knowledge of my client, the people, and the company. We subsequently didn't win, but it wasn't he was really going to be the lead horse on this particular assignment. But I was so impressed with his approach uh, that I've become a lot better at that. But I still can't match him on the preparation just because that's not the approach I like. But I was quite impressed, and I knew the client was impressed with the level of preparation. So I think that preparation that a salesperson can do can be a key plus because they may realize, well, there's something about my product that I can highlight based on their need. Uh, Something I've learned that can help them hopefully bridge the gap from doing business to not doing business, from not doing business to doing business. Excuse me.
Yeah. And some of that homework that you're not incorporating to the level that he does, but what are some of the ways that you perform that homework, especially if it's not a publicly traded company? How do you find this
Those are
information?
those are much more difficult
Mhm.
because the level of content is less. Publicly traded companies, I usually look at a few quarterly reports, annual reports, get big picture, look at the leaders because they're typically on the website, who the board members are, who the senior leadership team is. Some private companies have a portion of that data, typically less. a little more challenging to get that level of homework. Uh, but you can still do some homework. You can understand who they compete with because they do provide information. It's just not as much as a publicly traded company does.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And who is it typically at the company that you're connecting with, Dwayne? Who's your
Uh,
contact there? Is it
Great
like head of
question.
HR? Is it somebody else?
Great question. It varies. Sometimes I've gotten in through the board members, and they've cascaded down to senior leaders. Sometimes the CEO, sometimes the talent acquisition person, which reports to the CHRO or not, because sometimes that organization has given them enough room to make the decision on selecting me or my competitors. So every organization is a little bit different, and you learn about it along the way. Um, all of them have worked, and all of them have not worked. That's the beauty of that's the beauty of this particular game. But I did lead a sales organization many times, and for them it wasn't the same as what I do now because we already did business with the client. We already did business with large organizations and medium and small. So the question was, how do we do more? And for them, the homework was different. The homework was the data. Here's what we sold. Here are the things. Here are the items you do or do not carry. So it's a different kind of homework that you go into your presentation really with, here's how we're going to do better this year with you or the next period of time. So the homework is still there, but it's more knowledge in your homework because your existing business relationships and how do I take that to the next level. So it's still homework, but different.
Gotcha. Dwayne, from your experience, what are some of the most common mistakes that companies make when looking to fill executive level positions?
Um, so sometimes uh, it's my friends, my relationships that I already have. The organization says, "Boy, I know this group of people really well. They helped me 5 years ago, 8 years ago, what have you, in another organization that was perhaps doing something different, but I'm comfortable with them. So I will bring them, friends of John kind of mindset." And I think that can be the biggest detriment to how high can I go. Most of the time in my 17 years, I've probably placed the person I knew and said, wow, they're right for that role less than 10 times. So we're always listening to how are you defining the role? How is the hiring manager defining the role now? What do they really want from that talent? What are the subtle things that make a talent better than someone else? Because this is not a generic better. This is not someone who scored higher in the test. Everybody can have an undergraduate or graduate degree or CPA or some other certification. That's not the tiebreaker. The tiebreakers are, have you done a turnaround 3 times? Have you reduced costs dramatically? Have you introduced some kind of innovation multiple times that led to some improvement? They're looking for those things to be a member of their team. And sometimes when you just bring your buddy over, that buddy may not have all of the things that they would ask of us. So I've had a few times where, remember this one client that I don't know if they fired me, I fired them, but we fired each other.
It was a
they,
mutual parting of ways.
oh my gosh, it was painful. But the hiring manager could not define success, which is always challenging because I can't find for you what you can't define. So this person couldn't define success because every candidate it was a new group of what about this? So you couldn't. And then when you find that, then it was all over the map. And so we laid out, well, here are the things we've discussed, and tried to box it in to what are the 3 to 5 things that if they have this, you'll be pleased, and that will be the kind of leader to add to your team. And they just weren't trying to have that kind of conversation. They just wanted a free flowing, really broad range of possibilities. So shortly thereafter, they hired someone who had none of the characteristics of the people they had said. They were so bad, I would not have even interviewed that person, let alone interview and subsequently presented that person.
Wow.
I mean, eventually that person was fired because even though they were a C-level executive, they were way over their head. But that's happened to me a few times where the client eventually went with someone who was far below what they were asking us to do,
Mhm.
and perhaps it was a relationship or something like that that led them to make those decisions. But um, that's probably the worst thing that an organization can do is simply go with the known versus the unknown. Unknown will be more challenging in the short term, clearly the first 3, 6 months or more than a known. But if that unknown meets your criteria, and we'd go through a rigorous evaluation process, which isn't foolproof, but it usually helps. I think over a year plus, that unknown will typically be a better performer.
Dwayne, a little bit earlier in our conversation, you mentioned bumps and bruises you've had along the way. Would love to maybe hear about a particular bump or bruise, a particular challenge that you had to overcome personally or professionally, and maybe some lessons that you learned coming out the other side.
Oh, yes. Well, I'm only in search because of one of those bumps and bruises. So I was doing quite well in my career at a company, and um, my colleague I was the chief commercial officer, and we had a chief finance officer. Neither of us got promoted when our boss was promoted. And if he had gotten promoted, I would have been fine. If I had gotten promoted, I think he would have been fine. But neither of us were promoted. And I was just beside myself. And so when the opportunity presented itself for me to join another firm, I pursued it with gusto. And I was competing against someone I happened to know, and I knew I was stronger for that role than that person, just the nature. I knew the person. So they selected me, and within a short time, less than a year, it didn't work out. The people who worked reported for me, they didn't like my approach, my style, because it was different than my. Long story short, I was out. Then I joined another organization, and something else went wrong, and boom, I was out there. So in two senior level commercial roles, highly compensated, big title, big business card, I'm out. So I realized, oh, the next time I interview with someone, if I were them, I'd say, well, why are you here? And then what happened at the prior thing? It's like, golly, so my first, who knows how many minutes, I'm on the defensive trying to explain why I'm even actively looking for my third role in, year three kind of thing, which is not position A. And so I referenced earlier a friend of mine that got spoken to me about the search business. So I realized I needed to be somewhere where I had opportunity to control time, like how much I worked, where I worked, space, and income. Because while it took years to make anything close to what would be comfortable with or happy about, uh, eventually I thought I would be able to do reasonably well. And if I worked hard, the upside was there. So getting fired twice was probably back to back was probably the most difficult thing. But I never lost confidence in myself. I didn't think it was, boy, I'm a terrible leader or a terrible marketeer, which is why I was fired. I mean, clearly it didn't work out. Clearly they saw something that I didn't, but I never lost confidence in my ability to do the job. And I think you have to have your own set of confidence because that could be a confidence wrecker. Being fired once is certainly for cause, not breaking rules, but they say you're not performing well. Therefore, we want you to separate from this role. Sometimes that can be separate as in lower position or something, or out, exiting, but we want you out of the role you're in now and not at a bigger role. This is not a promotional conversation. That was tough. Back to back was really tough. Um, and then coming into the first 2 years of my search career, not performing anywhere close to where I'd been, 20 years before. So I had like a 4 year run of not a lot of great news that could be crushing. When you've had professional success or athletic success or whatever kind of success one has had, and then to go to the 4 years of each year is at the end of the year, you say, wow, this wasn't nearly as good as prior years. Have I peaked? Have I gotten to a point, a Peter principle, or anything that you could say if you go the negative route? But I didn't. I believed in myself. I believed in hard work. I didn't get anywhere successfully from taking the easy route. So I knew if I worked really hard and dedicated myself, that I would get better. The question was how much better. And if you recall, I mentioned trying to do too many things because I wasn't quite sure which thing would lead me to the success route. Say, wow, I can do that like that guy or this like this woman or whatever. And you realize you just have to focus and be really intentional on the thing you think you can be really good at. Um, and it goes back to my early career. I started my career at Procter and Gamble, phenomenal company. And I remember someone was asking me to sell insurance, and I said, well, to be okay, I need at least 10 hours a week to get any kind of business at all, whatever this is going to entail. And I said, if I spend those 10 hours on my P&G job, I know I can get promoted. I know I learn my craft better. I know that will lead to more promotions over time, and I'll be a better marketeer, my day job, not, a decent marketeer and making a little bit on the side from this other activity. And I think there are many, many people in different professions, try this dichotomy of I want my profession, it's okay, but I really want to pursue this other thing on the side. And and when I interview people like that, many times they're kind of satisfied, but they're never probably as good at either one as they could be if they were all in. And I can't speak for choices. Some people just like the difference of two unrelated career paths. But for me, going all in and going all in hard and saying, I'm playing to win. I'm playing to be great for my family. I'm not going to have my family have a different lifestyle because dad dropped the ball and didn't. No, dad is going to rise up. And, while I was just an okay rookie, made the squad, but I wasn't starting. That's how I felt in my first 4 years. Like I was just on the team, not really a starter. I said, no, I know I can be an all-star. I know I can make the starting team, and then I can make the Pro Bowl and the All-Star game. And that was really my goal. How do you get to the All-Star game? And that led me to continuous learning and led me to getting to the type of performance that's far better than I had in my corporate career from a objective and revenue standpoint. So while I wanted to be a president in my old life, um, and I still think that was a goal that was worth pursuing, being in the top of our company, I can't compare to my colleague, competitors in the same space. But I do feel good about some of the accomplishments I've made in this space, and it fuels me to try and hopefully stay at a high level of performance.
I appreciate you sharing all that, Dwayne. Going through what you did, for folks who haven't had that sort of hiccup's not even the right word. I mean, that was a pretty huge bump in the road, series of bumps in the road. People who haven't been through that probably can't appreciate like how challenging that is. You're a person that had been on the rise, in your professional career. You've been doing really well, working your way up. And then, okay, one time you get let go. I mean, that's enough to crush anybody, anybody. Then it happens again a year later. And now you're reinventing yourself, going into search, you're going into a whole new industry. You don't know how it works, you don't know the lingo, you don't have maybe the connections. Like you're starting from scratch at a point, when you thought you were going to, continue to be up and to the right. And so to do that and to stick with it 2, 3, 4 years until you get to a point where you're like, okay, like I got this, I know what I'm doing, I'm back. Dwain is back, the man is back, right? Like that's a rocky road. And I'm hearing you say, hey, I never lost confidence in myself. That's astounding. I mean, to go through each of those challenges and for the extended period of time that you went through them, to never lose confidence in yourself. I got to hear more about that. How do you hold on to this sense of self and this, I can do this, I will rise again?
Great question, especially when I reflect on it as the number of years, because you've gotten this bad feedback. But I had been a really good student in high school, college, grad school, high top of the class, kind of, top 5% performer. So I know in the world of people and professionals where I fit. I know I've got this again, many independent data points. And I worked at Procter and Gamble where these people were phenomenal. Every day I'm working with them and kind of competing in a little bit. I mean, not really, but kind of, because you're competing for when you get promoted, accolades, and those types of things. And having been promoted multiple places, so you say, wow, that guy is still in there. You just gotta find a way to get that person, in the marketplace in the right situation. But that person still exists. That person's in there in the market. And then I got into search in the downturn. But when you're new to something, you don't realize that it's a downturn. I mean, downturn for you in your industry. I had no idea. So, which is probably better for me, because think about it. If I had wild success in those 2 years, I'm feeling I'm bulletproof, even though I still would have had the same skill opportunities, in a new industry. But if it had been super robust and I had been getting business with the level of skill I had,
Mm.
that would have probably not been as good for me over time, because I would have felt like I knew things that I really didn't know. I might have just been a
Mm-hmm.
beneficiary of, the rising tide, so to speak. The other thing that I did, though, I looked at it as search as buying a franchise. So I said, let's say it's going to take 5 years. So my wife and I planned it out. Here's how much we're going to pull down per month, so our lifestyle is the same. And so if I do better than that, good for us. We just pull down less. I'll pull down none. But we had that plan. So I was hoping I wouldn't have to pull down for too many years or months. But mentally, you have, when you buy a franchise, it could be a phenomenal franchise, but it may not be great for you in the first 2 or 3 years, because of your location or the team you hire, or what, things. Again, it's new. And I think that was helpful to realize that, this is not the same game. It's similar, but there are so many unique elements to it, um, that you can't just assume this will be an easy transition. Because again, if it's easy, anybody can do it, and then everybody makes a little. Call it flipping burgers. It's an easy job. You can hire a guy and a person, and they can start within a day and get it done. As you move up the challenge pyramid, it takes more to do those things well. and that more takes time.
I like what you said there, and I didn't realize that the transition took place during the downturn, 2008, 2009, right? When nobody's hiring, right? Companies are not growing, they're retracting. The Great Recession, everybody's worried about what's happening, what's going to come, and so this is the time that you're starting a new career. Probably the worst time to be in executive search. Um, and but I love how you found the silver lining in that, because you're like, hey, this was actually a good thing because it caused me to have to sharpen my sword. And if I had come in during boom times, yeah, but I thought I'm bulletproof. I got this. Dwayne he rocks and rolls in anything he does. But the fact that you started in something new in a lean time made you have to really get better. Had to, look for big things and little dials to turn at the same time, so that as the economy started coming back, you were well positioned to better take advantage of those opportunities that you were able to get in front of.
Yes. And then that's part of the DHR story, which had a better brand than the firm they acquired,
Mm.
and more colleagues that did more things well. And so I was able to learn from many more people than I was in the smaller entity. So I could contrast my approach to more colleagues who had a different slash better. I mean, it didn't take much to have a better approach, I think. I mean, I wasn't the worst, but I wasn't looking at who am I better than. I'm looking at who are the top of the hit parade, who are the most successful people in this game, because that's always been the approach. Who's successful and why? And I'm not going to be like all of them or maybe any of them, but I want to understand what makes them really good, what allows them to win business, and how do I incorporate that? And I learned quite a few things, some that I still keep today. One thing I learned from a colleague, she was better than I was, because she had been in the industry, 10 years at the time. She had a little bit of a interesting personality that wouldn't appeal to a lot of people, but she had this one element that was awesome. It was a one-page grid. And that one-page grid for an executive, having been an executive, is awesome, because in one page I get to see what I need to see about this candidate. And I use that to this day. And because I was an executive for many years, I know they have a short attention span. They want it now, they want it crisply, cleanly, and they want to get it really quickly. And so I use that approach. And because I know what many executives, nothing works for everyone. Some still want some crazy amount of content, which is, I don't believe in that. But for most, the one page is just right what they need, because then they can quickly see why they've been presented, what the highlights are for that person relative to the need, and almost every time they can say thumbs up, thumbs down, which is what an executive likes to do. Let's keep moving. Good, you got it. Or they're missing. Ask some questions. Why? What about what? And based on their
You're
answers,
taking
up
a
or
whole
down.
bunch of data from this person's background, from their CV, their resume, and you're distilling it down into bullet points, a grid fashion that's easy to digest.
Yeah, and that was from her. See, I didn't learn anything else from her, but that was a huge takeaway. So I wasn't trying to pick, everything from everyone, but that was like, oh my gosh, this is how I think. And it was better than anything I had created up to that point. So I threw all my stuff away, and I quickly adopted her piece, and that was, something I would not have gotten without DHR, for example.
Yeah, and the other thing I love about this particular story, Dwayne, is it highlights the importance of, man, anytime I can go into a conversation with curiosity and the idea that I have something to learn from this person, then I am in a much better position to receive even a tiny little nugget of wisdom. Like the way you're describing this woman, maybe her personality was abrasive, or just it wasn't, easy for a lot of people to get, sort of snuggled up to. And it would have been easy to just dismiss her out of hand, like, man, I don't want to replicate anything she's doing. But instead, you were able to carve away some of this other stuff and you're like, man, that grid is awesome. I am going to borrow that and use it in my process. And so, yeah, it's a great reminder for me again, and I'm sure for many of our listeners to say, hey, when you can go into a conversation and you approach it with curiosity and don't assume that you are better than that person, don't assume that you know more than that person, don't assume necessarily that you have something to teach that person, but man, what could this person have to teach me? I think that curiosity positions all of us better to learn and move forward. Dwain, I've just got one more question for you today, but before I ask it, I want to do two things. For those listening today, if you like today's content, please hit the like, subscribe, or share button on your favorite podcast app. Dwain, I also want to tell people the best way to get in touch with you, and I think we may have already done this. Is that Comcast.net email address, or would you rather they use a DHR Global?
The Comcast.net is fine.
Okay.
And,
You want to
I
repeat it
look
for us
at
one
both
more
of them
time?
daily. It's DCELIS as in Sam, T as in Tom, AN as in Nancy at Comcast.net.
Great. All right, Dwain, last question for you. I'm curious, how do you see the executive search space evolving in the next few years? What do you think the big changes are that are coming?
Well, like many areas, I think AI will eventually be more important. Exactly how, I don't know. I think companies will be able to uncover some of the talent better, faster than they do now. And many companies do a great job, without a third party. But the AI may enable them to do some sifting through, and AI will be able to probably do some video interviews, which is not new information, but allows them to do it better and maybe pivot, not just a straight, here are my 5 questions, but maybe pivot based on answers. I can see that as an evolution, and that could reduce some of the need for third parties to some degree for some roles. Um, I think there will be a need for third parties because if you even get contacted by the AI for company X, they still say, oh, that's company X. I'm not familiar with them. I'm not all that curious. Whereas when we speak to them, we represent the whole alphabet. So while they may not be interested in this particular opportunity, there may be something behind curtain number 2 that could be interesting with a different company, different industry, or what have you. So I think there will always be an opportunity for us. And maybe AI can help us, do some of the work that we do a little more rapidly as well. But I think a large part is still, as long as there is a people component to a industry or a business, it'll be helpful to have a person kind of sift through those personalities and who will fit with whom, the matchmaking component of the role that we play.
What do you hear from your peers in this space? Are people more excited or more concerned about the rise of AI in this space?
In the short term, it's a novelty, so not a lot of concern. Uh, but it's something to observe, like many other areas, like robotics and manufacturing. There was like, oh my gosh, robots, will there be a need for people? Well, robots have been around since the 70s, early 80s. In manufacturing, there's still lots and lots of employees that work on the floor. Even in the more advanced areas, there's still, a fair number of people in those jobs. So, but they're doing different things and perhaps fewer, but it took many, many years to get there. Similarly, I think that will be the case for us. It won't be 27 all of a sudden the industry is upside down. I don't think it'll be that rapid by any stretch.
Gotcha. Well, Dwain, I want to be the first one to thank you for sharing both your time and your story with us today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it was great. Thank you so much for the invitation and the questions. Really enjoyed the time.
All right. Folks, that's a wrap on another episode of the Inspired Stories podcast. Thanks for learning with us today.